when I think about how I would actually spend a year without my smartphone, it would include things like making sure I actually got to the gym every day, walking the dog instead of sitting on my phone uploading to Facebook and Instagram. It would be actually attending those parent-teacher conferences. And because I work from home, I would definitely take more time to read.
Well, you don't end up doing what you need to do for your family, yourself, growing your brain, knowing more about the world around you when you're stuck online. Or you feel like you have to be online, always have to be tethered to your phone. What does that do for kids? What does that do for parents? Joining us now is Dr. Lisa Strohman. She's a clinical psychologist, attorney, and founder of Digital Citizen Academy. It's an online curriculum dedicated to improving the lives of students, parents, and educators, and it uses great resources, tools, and knowledge to help foster a healthy balance with technology. She joins us now. Dr. Strohman, it's so important that we have this conversation, I think, before the beginning of the next school year, during the summertime, because there are so many moms that I know who during the summer is like, oh, I don't want to spend all this money on camps. I have to work during the day. So what if I let my kid, have a few hours online? What's the big deal? What do you say to those parents who are just kind of throwing their hands up? They're just frustrated and they, let their kids become free-range kids on the internet.
Well, first of all, I absolutely empathize with them because I am one of those mothers. So I'm in this with everyone.
Me too.
Yeah, it is really hard, but you look at the numbers and you have on average these kids that are old enough to stay home now are online between 7 and 11 hours a day. And we know scientifically it impacts the brain. It actually reduces their cortical thickness. It causes their brains to stop working as efficiently as it should at this very critical developmental point. So, again, I can't speak highly enough about how do we educate not just us as parents because it's complicated, but how do we get the information to our kids? Because they will make better choices once they know. And that's what's so important and what I've kind of dedicated all of my time to doing.
Well, when children know that they have a limited period of time on the internet and they have to earn that, does that make it better, assuming there are guardrails in place and bad sites are filtered out? Is kind of treating it as a reward for other things a better way to go?
I think yes, it's absolutely a better way to go. And I think that as a parent, you're doing a big benefit to your kids if you at least understand that there should be some limits, that we can reward certain things. And when I talk to parents and go and speak on this issue, I talk about it as being like a digital pyramid, like a food pyramid, right? That there's stuff on the top you really don't want your kids to consume, and there's stuff on the bottom that it's okay if they're consuming. And the difference really with the families that I see are so successful is they understand what is the junk food of digital consumption and what is the stuff that's more healthy and more appropriate for our kids to have.
And Dr. Strohman, the amount of time that young people spend on their phones is shocking. We referenced some of this before, but 85% of smartphone users will check their device while speaking with friends and family. Now, the other night we were out at a restaurant, my kids, just a local little kind of divey place near us. And my kids now, none of them have phones. They're 9, 11, and 14, and I'm just not getting them phones. I'm like the hated parent, but I don't care. They're not getting. My daughter's like, when am I getting a phone? I said, how does never sound to you? You're not getting one, ever. And so I'm like, I'm such a dinosaur, but I don't care.
Perfect.
I just don't care. I literally don't care. So if she has to call me, everyone around her can, she can borrow a phone. So I'm not worried about that. At least not until she's kind of at the end of high school. She already has, some attention issues, and so the last thing I want to do is give her a phone. It's too tempting. But when you see that lack of human interaction because a screen is now in between you and your child, or a husband and wife, or a boyfriend even and a girlfriend. I've seen this on first dates because I've asked the people, I'm like, just a question, are you guys on a first date? Yes. And I was like laughing, like, how many times did you just check your phone, dude? Like, at my age, you can do that. You're just like an annoying old lady. And the guy was like, well, just a few times. I said, that's not romance. I don't know what that is. That's not romance. Oh my gosh. Like, I start kind of, usually the other person on the other side of it will start laughing like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. Yet they get sucked into that pattern. So Dr. Strohman, let's just focus for the moment. We're going to talk about the dangers of what this does to your attention and your overall well-being. But the practical way we interact with each other just at a meal, give us your 1, 2, 3 on that.
The minute you pull out a cell phone, to your point, you're going to really lose that emotional connection. You're not listening to the other person. Most people don't realize the minute you have a cell phone out, you lose 40% of the attention of what that person is saying with you. So if you have a cell phone out during a meal, you basically are telling the other person you're important enough unless something more important comes up. And it's just disrespectful, and it's rude, and it's really one of the pieces that I see that breaks down an American family connection, whether it's a relationship or with your kids. It really is something that we should, as people with cell phones, understand. We have to be thoughtful to the people we're sitting with.
Well, I can't tell you how many times even now my kids notice this. Because, I mean, I bring it up. Like, you're not really talking to me. And I always say, eyes. Look at me. Eyes. Eyes. Your eyes tell the whole story. And if you're looking down, you're telling the other person, I don't really care about you. Because there's something on eBay or something on Instagram that's more interesting than this conversation.
Well, and I would have to give you credit for being a thoughtful parent. I would say when I look out and have these conversations and traveling across the U.S., I would say 80% of parents don't stop to have that conversation, to note those kids or people, even adults, that aren't connecting to one another, that have their cell phones out all of the time. You're a busy woman. I'm a busy person. If I'm with my kids, my cell phone is gone. That is their time because it is so precious. And I think that we just have been sold this bill of goods that we have to be connected all the time. And that's where I feel like we lose each other and we lose that empathy and compassion for one another.
No, I can't agree more. Dr. Strohman, tell us specifically about the dangers of screen addiction or screen obsession, especially to the developing brain. And then we're actually going to move into what it does for adults and their daily lives. So let's start first about the youngest of children. I see kids who are barely able to walk already on iPads, sitting in strollers, which is just shocking to me. At sports things that I was at a thing with my son, a flag football game a couple weeks ago, and it was like the blazing sun. The kid was in a stroller with one of those little covers over the stroller. So he wasn't in the direct sunlight, but he was sitting outside, and the father just plopped the iPad right in front of him. He must have been maybe 3 years old, maybe.
It's devastating. I mean, literally, when you look at these young children, there's only 2 times in our life that our brain actually has a growth of brain matter, and it is at the toddler years, which is between 2 and 3, which is why they become super chaotic and difficult. And that's typically when, in the U.S. at least, we're handing them their first kind of usable device. And the minute that you hand that to them, the developmental structures in the brain start to wire differently. They're not playing catch. They're not making eye contact. They're not walking as much. So all of those developmental structures and connections that should be made tend to wire in a different way when you're handing them those devices really early. The second time that they get that brain development, and the last time in our lifetime, is at puberty. And so if you can imagine, like, there's the 2 worst times that we could hand a device to someone whereby we know that they're going to actually wire their brains differently and lose an ability to have these impressive neuronal connections is at puberty and at toddler years. And those are the 2 times in the U.S. that we typically push forward and give them greater access. So it literally will hobble them. And I just can't say that the industry itself doesn't recognize that because of those developmental periods in time, that it's much easier for the kids to get hooked at those times because their brain is seeking out unique neural connections. And so, again, conspiracy or not, you just have to look at kind of the trends of when it's coming out, and when you, as a parent, are educated and you educate the kids, which is what DCA is all about, they start to make better choices, right? They start to understand, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't be using this for hours on a time when they get a little bit older, because they recognize it's hurting themselves.
But isn't it easier? It's easier for parents just to park. It used to be in front of the TV, but I watched a lot of TV growing up in the 70s. But number one, it was great TV. It was just great television. 70s were like the golden era of TV. It was great TV, like Mary Tyler Moore. I mean, that's where I got my sense of humor, is watching 70s television. Yeah, right. all the great old shows. Right. So, but I don't know. It's a different thing when you need that. You have to hit the button and it takes you somewhere else. Then in I think it was Dr. Barbara Jennings, who's a cognitive scientist, gave this TED-Talk we were watching, and I just want to play this and get your reaction.
It turns out that everything about this technology is designed to rope us in, from the alert that it emits to the amount of text you can see on the screen. And we buy into it because we've become information seekers. Even the text on a news media, audios, visuals, and text scrolling across the screen, and we go for it. The most common use of cell phones is occurring in college students. They're receiving about 100 texts a day and checking for their texts an additional 60 times a day. Their compulsive addiction isn't to the cell phone. It's to the dopamine they get every time they get a message.
The chemical part of all of this.
Yes.
Dr. Strohman. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think that if you look at, and I did a TED Talk as well and talked about the dopamine as well as the structural, the dopamine itself, what Dr. Jennings is talking about, is so key, because what we used to think was that the anticipation wasn't what was cueing us. It was actually reading the text message. But now we know that dopamine receptor is actually just anticipating. So now you strap on a wearable on your wrist, or you have a cell phone that buzzes, right? It's the anticipation. It's the part that we don't know what we're going to get on the other end that causes that spike and that increase in dopamine. So she's absolutely right. Her numbers are a little behind in terms of how many times we check text messages as adults. College students themselves, I think that the rate now is about 30% of them do all of their academic work on a cell phone. They're just absolutely never without it. So those numbers are so high at this point.
That is, I don't even know what to say about that. It's going to have it's going to have a sociological, long-term sociological, physical, and psychological, cultural effect on our country, on our world. I mean, the world will never be the same again, and there's a lot of conveniences. We all know that, and a lot of good stuff. But still the biggest seller online is porn, is it not? Isn't that the biggest seller by far?
Yeah. I have one daughter and one son, and I think that we will lose a generation of young men. We've already lost. I think that the Me Too movement isn't even touching our children because of the proliferation of porn. Average age is 8 at first viewing, and now chronic viewing is 11. So we've got these young children in elementary school starting to be infused with this porn industry so early on, when they literally are trying to develop their sense of self, their sense of sexuality, and so now I see college students and young adults that have what I would call pedophilic tendencies, because they originally created this sexual attachment at a very early age, and nobody's talking about that. It's terrifying.
Oh my God! I mean, the young boys. The average age you see your first pornographic image is 9 years old. Is that correct? Still,
right, 8 or 9, yes.
And then it's so easy, especially for boys, to become addicted to those images. And then what does that do to their sexual performance as years go on? What does that do?
Well, we see a lot in the cases when I go into high schools or middle schools even, and I talk to these kids, a lot of the girls are either getting distributed child pornography because boys are taking pictures of themselves and sending them, or when they get girls alone, they initially think that the best thing that they can do is pull out their private and have the girl, want to touch it. And so I spend a lot of my time telling boys, I'm like, hey, there's not a woman alive that I've ever met in my life that wakes up in the morning and says, please, I can't wait if I get a picture today of somebody's penis, but I'm going to be so excited. This is not going to happen. So I try to combat this kind of porn infusion in their brains with some reality day in and day out when I'm talking about these things with the kids.
Well, I think that we'll have a really upsetting conversation with our, with ourselves, with our communities, with our families, and then we'll think it's too late. Why didn't we do something earlier? When we found out, Dr. Strohman, that the tech CEOs, most of them don't even give their children the access to devices that the regular person does. They knew from the very beginning what these were going to be. Maybe not every aspect, but we already found that out. Was it, I don't know if it was Bill Gates, or they understood that these were going to be very, very addictive devices.
So I will tell you that when I did the TED Talk in Pasadena, I had Bill Gates, I had Steve Jobs, and I had Michael Dell, and I had the stats of how they restricted their family's access, and the TED family asked me to take it out. They said, we can't put that in your talk. And to me, it's so infuriating.
Wait. Explain that to our podcast listeners one more time. So you're giving a TED Talk, which is seen all over the world.
I'm giving a TED Talk all over the world, and they said, you have to submit, this is what our talk is about. Mine is empowering children to rise above technology addiction. So for me, it's all about, my background, how do I get them to understand this is a real issue. And let me tell you, and I talk about that the tech industry is exactly using the same playbook as the tobacco industry. So they are doing hook, line, and sinker, the exact same thing that was happening. And I bring up in my script, this is what Bill Gates doesn't allow any of his children to have any technology before the age of 14. Steve Jobs didn't allow any of his kids to have any Apple products or tablets in their house. And Michael Dell spent like $1.8 million on security and programming in the house to ensure that his kids wouldn't go into areas that they shouldn't do. It'd be nice if we could afford that as listeners, right? To protect our kids the same way. They said, we can't have that in there. We're not going to name people in the industry in a talk like this, and had me scrub that part of my talk.
Well, when big companies or big organizations end up censoring voices that give important pieces of information, what does that become? Some of these big organizations and big companies are like mini governments. We have to understand that because they have so much power. So if you are an individual who said, no, you can't say this, then where is the freedom of expression? Where is the freedom of speech once your TED Talk is altered? That's disturbing. That again, they are proving your point, are they not? In all of this,
they absolutely are. Yeah, and it's frustrating to try to get back into the mainstream. Yeah, to talk about the privacy and how under the veil of what the consumers are interested in, for instance. The Apple industry has taken off 9 out of the 11 parent monitoring apps off of their system, saying that they violate the privacy of the children that are involved, right? So the public thinks, okay, what is Apple doing? In my opinion, we're competing against what they're doing, and they're taking off our ability as parents and as consumers to be able to protect and monitor and make sure that what we're doing. But nobody wants to talk about that part. Right? Nobody wants to see the realities of why, under the veil of privacy, that they say that they're doing that.
Well, I know it's hard for parents, or you think it's hard, but you can do it. There have been some times in my house where, I had this iPads for, answering the door. Well, I shut that down real quick when I found that, again, a kid picks it up, they put in one word in a search engine, and then all of a sudden you find out they're getting that thing in the middle of the night and looking at things they shouldn't be looking at. That had to happen one time for me, and that was it. Every iPad's out of my house. I don't have any iPad. It's all gone. Everything's locked down. I have to use a computer, but it has like 3 passwords on it. It's restricted. You can't even go on YouTube if you wanted to. So all of this is, but I had to learn the hard way, and it was a scary moment. But you have to bite the bullet and do it as a parent. There's no other way. There is no other way. Might as well just give your kid over to a internet predator, because that's essentially what you're doing, even if they're just preying on your child's mind.
Well, and I think that you're absolutely right, and I think it is hard. I empathize with it. I think as a parent, it's not our job to be their friend. It's our job to keep them healthy, happy, and safe, right? And if a child is looking at disturbing pornographic images or death images or whatever it is that's taking them down this road, you're going to have a psychologically traumatized child. So I think people don't talk about the secondary and tertiary causes of internet imaging that they see, because you can't unsee those things. And these are good kids with good families that are seeing terrible things, and then the parents feel very, embarrassed or ashamed oftentimes that this has happened to them. And I'm here to tell you it happens to all of us. And so how do we create, this is my passion of how do we create kids to be part of the solution so they understand it, and parents get them support in figuring out how do we understand that there are so many things that we can't teach them about predators at the level they need to be taught. But if you create, an app that all the kids go to, it would be the same as saying, I'm going to go to Disneyland, where I know a lot of predators know that there's young kids going around with parents that are exhausted. There's going to be a higher rate of predators there. The online apps are the same thing. You build an app like Minecraft or Roblox for the little kids, you're going to get predators that hack in there and start to have conversations, which we call grooming and luring when we do that. So as parents, don't love your kids so much that you assume that because they're good kids, they're not going to step into potholes or mud holes of technology, areas of malice, because they're out there. And these guys are out there looking for our kids every day. And it's, to me, when I worked at the FBI as a visiting scholar, I did homicidal pedophilia. Those guys could go after 5 kids in a 30-day period. Today, I can have a predator that's going after 250 to 300 kids in a 30-day period without a geographical restriction on them. And the kids go to them. They don't even have to drive in the white van and try to go around and pick up your kids. They just go to the most popular apps and start having conversations.
I hate all of this.
For them.
Yeah, I hate grooming. The word grooming. First of all, the penalties for doing anything to a child, an elderly person, an animal, anyone who's, I think that the penalties should just be, I'm sorry, the worst penalties ever, criminal penalties. But you can't. We have to be honest about what the world is now, and we're not trying to be alarmist. I mean, Dr. Strohman, I know a lot of people are listening and said, "Oh, you're exaggerating the threat," or you think until it's happened to you. And believe me, as someone who's seen these disturbing images just pop up on a screen because someone hit some app or something, I'm like, what? Like, how did this possibly? And it chills you to the bone, and it makes you hurt as a parent. But it doesn't. You don't have to live that way. There are just these common sense, ways to safeguard against this. And so I'll have you close it out for us. This is such an important conversation, Dr. Strohman. Your final thoughts.
I would say that, as parents, you need to limit, you need to monitor, you need to understand what your kids are doing online. And so a particular point for your listeners in the end is, a lot of people think Snapchat, one of the most popular apps, is harmless if we're monitoring it. But Snapchat itself has a mapping technique from it. So I've had 3 families contact me through Digital Citizen Academy that have told me themselves that their child was targeted, a stranger came to their door, and in 2 of those cases, that child was sexually assaulted. We're talking one of them was a gated community, and 2 of them were in affluent neighborhoods. This is not for parents to pretend like it's not happening. Engage with your kids, understand their passwords, And do not let them go on apps that you know that a predator or somebody out there that would be interested in your child would be able to access them. Please, that's all I do is try to keep our families and our kids safe.
Dr. Lisa Strohman is the founder of the Digital Citizen Academy, the terrific online curriculum. Please check it out. It's at digitalcitizenacademy.com. What's the website? .org. And thank you so much. We'll link this all up, Dr. Strohman, on our website and our Facebook page. So many parents are listening to this podcast across the country, across the globe. So the citizens of this country, be alert. It's digitalcitizenacademy.org. Lisa Strohman, thank you so much. And let's go to Curtis in Maryland.